Hi, everyone.
Hello.
It's a real honor to be here and to represent the Race and Resistance Studies faculty and to just say a few words, hopefully a little bit of inspiration for our graduating students. I want to start actually with a little bit of grounding. If we could all just take a deep breath together. We're gonna take a few more in a second, but folks familiar with the word conspiracy? You know, we hear that all the time, like QAnon and or like election fraud conspiracies and all that kind of stuff. You know, the word conspiracy actually means to breathe together, to conspire, to breathe together. To inspire is to breathe into, to aspire is to breathe towards. We won't talk about perspire right now, but to conspire literally means to breathe together. So let's maybe take 3 more breaths together. And we actually may not realize it, but we are all part of a grand conspiracy with all life that ever has been and ever will be. We are part of the lungs of the planet. We breathe in CO2, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2. And the photosynthesizing organisms, the plants and the trees and the algae, they breathe in that CO2 and they breathe out oxygen, and we're just part of this grand respiration with all life. We are the lungs of the planet. And in fact, every time you take a sip of water, which I encourage you to do because dehydration is death, every time you take a sip of water, you are taking a sip of water that has traveled through the ancestors. Every drop of water there is every drop of water there ever has been and ever will be. It's just going through this hydrologic cycle. It's moving around the planet, and it's coming down as rain, and it's traveling through life. And when you drink water, you are drinking the water that was drunk by your ancestors, that has traveled through the soil, and that has been living in the plants. And we don't actually need science to tell us about the carbon cycle or the hydrologic cycle, because all of our peoples and all of our ancestors and all of our cultures and all of our communities have known this forever, that we are all connected and interdependent upon each other and every other living thing. All of our ancestors have a story about this, a word for this. And we can talk about Ubuntu, or Sankofa, or Buen Vivir, or ecological Swaraj. We can talk about Kapwa. We can talk about Earth democracy. We can talk about 7 generations. We can talk about Kalse, and we can go on and on and on. We do not need science to tell us what is true, because it is alive in all of us. And that knowledge is the knowledge that the only thing that matters, the only thing that matters is relationships. That relationships are the foundation of everything. You know, since we're at the university, folks familiar with René Descartes? Folks know who René Descartes is? He's that European philosopher from the 1600s who said, "I think, therefore I am." You know, he also created the Cartesian paradigm that kind of flattens everything. And you know, this kind of "I think, therefore I am" forever wisdom of Western academia, this philosophical foundation that drives us towards individualism and self-obsession. I think, therefore I am. It's not that it's not true. I mean, it's kind of obviously true. It's that it's not helpful. It's not meaningful. I would much prefer to say, I only have a name because I am not alone. If I was alone, I wouldn't need a name. It's not even my name. It is so I can be in community. Relationships are the foundation of everything. And the Western way of viewing the world wants to take the world apart and talk about it as a collection of objects, of things. It is not a collection of objects, it is a complex of relationships. And if you don't remember anything else I'm about to say, you can walk away with that. So the dominant academic approach is to divide knowledge into disciplines. Discipline is kind of an interesting word. I find it to be a very strange word. And discipline kind of has two different meanings, both of which are kind of relevant here today, especially for those of you who are kind of coming out of the university. The first, of course, is this idea of a discipline as like a formal body of knowledge that has some formal borders put around it that contains what it is and what it means. That's one way we talk about discipline, like an academic discipline. And the other way we talk about discipline, of course, is where the word comes from. It's like, to discipline is to like enforce or to beat people into submission, to discipline, And that's actually where the word comes from, to enforce, to impose. And of course, or to bring into line is another way to think about it. And in some ways, the conventional university does both. It enforces a body of knowledge with formal, defined borders, fragmenting thought, just as physical borders fragment ecosystems and communities. I think we're all familiar with the idea that we didn't cross the borders crossed us. And it uses a system of enforcement, which is this notion of what's acceptable knowledge. And I just want to point out that race and resistance studies is not that. It is not a discipline. It is a framework. It is not defined by borders, which are rigid, inflexible, and arbitrary. And just to be clear, when I say arbitrary, I don't mean random. I mean there's an arbiter, and it weighs us, right? No, it's not any of that. It's a way of making meaning of the world that's different. And we will not be disciplined, and you should not be disciplined. Not by the academy or the university, not by white supremacy, not by capitalism or heteropatriarchy or imperialism. Because if discipline is to be put in line, resistance is literally to stand up, to stop injustice, and to fight for freedom. Race and resistance studies is not just an area of study, it is a way of life, a way of being in right relationship to each other and the rest of the living world. Our analytical approach, your analytical approach, our approaches are intersectional by nature. It is about letting go of simple stock solutions to complex problems like climate change, which is what I work on, but instead navigating complexity towards holistic, intersectional solutions that create the conditions for well-being, belonging, liberation, and justice. I'd like to get super pragmatic for a moment if I can, because I know there's a bunch of families here, and you're probably wondering what the hell your graduate's going to do with a degree in race and resistance studies. And it is a damn good question. So I actually did a little bit of work for y'all. So yesterday I happened to look up employment opportunities in my particular area of work, climate justice, economic justice, organizing. I went to 3 different lists, for alliances and organizations, and I found about 200 postings for job opportunities.
Woo!
And all y'all are qualified for every single one of them. And the reason is because the skills are not what our movements and organizing is looking for. That's the easy part. We can get anyone to write grants, anyone can learn to do the skills or the tasks. That's not the hard part. What our movements are looking for, what really is the hard part, is critical analysis, shared values, and the capacity to navigate complexity and contradictions. That's the hard part. And that is what you have all spent the last several years building the capacity to do well. I want to point out that navigating contradictions is all that there is, right? Unfortunately, we can't just close our eyes and get into a time machine and live in the world we want to live in. We got to get there from here. And that involves every day, all the time, navigating contradictions. And you need two things to navigate contradictions well. You need a finely tuned and regularly maintained moral compass, and you need a community of practice. If being a better person was as simple as an act of will, I'd be a way better human being by now. It's not that easy. It takes a community of practice. It takes a group of people who care enough about you to support you in being the person you want to be in the world. Right? Because as Nina Simone says, ain't nobody perfect because ain't nobody free. So we need each other to be able to tune and maintain and reflect on our moral compass. I also want to point out that all y'all need to see yourselves as organizers. I actually don't care what you do for a job. What I really care about is how you do it, and that's about organizing. That's about creating the conditions so that you and your folks can act and organize and move and build towards living into the world we know we need and creating the conditions to support each other to do that. And you can do that anywhere, because that's not a job. That's an orientation. Organizing is an orientation towards engaging with people towards our shared and collective liberation. And it is to that end that you should take race and resistance studies with you into the world. I want to say a little bit about my work, which is in climate justice, really briefly, and then I'm going to invite people to tell me to shut up when the clock runs out. I'm like most cis hetero men. My ego has completely destroyed my internal clock, so I need people to keep time for me. So anyway, I just want to say that, like, folks familiar with the climate crisis? You know, folks hear about climate change a lot of time. So I've been working on climate and climate disruption for a really long time, except that I am not interested in looking up at the atmosphere and counting carbon. I'm interested in looking down at the economy, at the exploitation of land and labor and living systems, and the erosion of seed and of soil and of story and of spirit. And more importantly, I am committed to being in solidarity with those communities who are on the front lines of the crisis and who are also at the forefront of the solutions. And I am so privileged to have landed in race and resistance studies as a political home for that journey. Oh, I was going to try and avoid using the word journey because of there. I ended up doing that. And I want you to all, like, not think so much about, like, what's the job or what's the discipline, but instead, what's the orientation, what's the approach? Okay, last thing, and I'm gonna excitedly let you all transition to your degrees. So I want to just say that I invite you to not look at your degree as a sign of completion. I instead invite you to consider it an invitation into a community of practice. And we, as the Faculty of Race and Resistance Studies, are so honored and so humble to be able to invite you into this community of practice with us and to see you as comrades and as colleagues. And it is such a great honor and privilege to join you and to learn from you as you have hopefully learned a tiny little bit from us. So thank you very much. And I would like you to take a moment to look at each other, look at all y'all who are graduating, give each other some eye contact, like a toast, how you're supposed to make eye contact, and realize that you here are who you need. And stick together. Thank you.